Now, we've talked about this on the show before, right? We've got fresh, that's a nice pound-and-a-half lobster, right? And then, you know, we've got this is a female lobster, right? Because it's got soft over here. We want to make sure that they're lively and fresh and they're alert. No dead lobsters.
I have a very special guest with me today, Sam Baltrusis.
Hello, Cheryl.
I love that name. And I've been so excited about this show because we're going to talk about a lot of good issues surrounding homelessness. And we're not going to take up a lot of time. We're going to get right in with Sam telling us a little bit about himself and what projects he's working on.
Well, I am the editor-in-chief of Spare Change News. I also have a show on Mondays here on Channel 9, Spare Change News TV. It's at 5:30. So you and I met in preparation for working for BeLive and CCTV.
Exactly.
And so yeah, I'm editor-in-chief of Spare Change News. I've been editor since January 1st. It's been a fantastic journey going from, I've been a journalist for 20 years, but working with our vendors and working with writers on a cause that is really near and dear to my heart. Mm-hmm. And to kind of give you a backstory, I was working on a book. My fourth book was Haunted Boston Harbor, so I was doing a lot of research on Long Island. And Long Island was where the largest city-run homeless shelter was located. And I was kind of following the stories of the people that were displaced from Long Island on October 8th, and I was like, what do I, how can I help? Because I wanted to help those people because they didn't know where to go. Mm-hmm. And I reached out to the religious leaders of Boston, and there's one minister who told me to pray, and I did, and I was like, well, help me, show me what to do. And it ended up, I got an email about 5 minutes later that there was a job opening at Spare Change News as an editor. So I do think it's from above.
Amazing.
and it's been a journey. It's been a lot of work, but it's been a great journey.
Excellent. Well, like I said, I was excited about you coming on this show, and I have a lot of questions. I'm going to see if I could go to some of the questions. The first question or comment, we wanted to talk about maybe the March of the Homeless. And I believe Boston Homeless Solidarity Committee is spearheading that. Yeah,
the Boston Homeless Solidarity Committee actually were there on my show 2 weeks ago. Okay. Cleve Ray, who was on Long Island, he is one of the people of the Boston Homeless Solidarity Committee, and also James Shearer, who is our founder, our co-founder, and one of our columnists, and Cassie Hurd, who was on my show. It's going to start on the 23rd at Woods Mullen, and we're going to cover it on Spare Change News. We have a new online editor, Alex Ramirez, who's been covering the situation on Long Island, and he's going to do a live Twitter feed. So we're gonna have photos and reports from the field, and hopefully really get a lot of people involved with the march. It's important for me not to. I'm a journalist, so I'm not supposed to actually advocate. I'm supposed to cover it.
Yes.
But I do. This is a situation where I feel strongly that I should kind of cross the line and actually protest.
Excellent. We have a lot of questions here. There was a Y2Y Harvard shelter grand opening last week for homeless shelters for young people between the ages of 18 and 24.
Yeah, the Y2Y, we're actually working on a story on that. That's going to open in November. It has several beds. It's been a sort of a work in progress. Spare Change News has been covering or following sort of the developments of this homeless shelter. It's geared towards homeless youth who are 18 to 24, and it is slotted to open up in November. And they're going to be at the First Parish Church, which is on Church Street in Harvard Square, and it's a beautiful, beautiful space. And they're currently raising money and funds to be able to fund it. But it's one of those things that that's near and dear to my heart because a lot of the people that I deal with are homeless youth. A couple of our vendors are in their 20s and probably would qualify to be able to stay at that shelter. So it's a huge need for giving a place for kids, especially kids who are in the foster care system and who have aged out of the foster care system and have nowhere to go.
Excellent. You mind if we take a look at some of the
Sure.
Spare Change News covers? Now this issue, the current issue. I read the article. It was fascinating about a young man who's a part of Cirque du Soleil,
Yeah.
from my understanding, and a native of Boston area, who you can tell us a little bit more about.
Yeah, Joey Pudiano, I think it's one of those names like mine. He wrote a book called Acrobatic, and we met several years ago. I was talking about my book, Goes to Boston, and he's like, "Oh, I'm writing a book too," and I'm like, "Oh, okay." And he's like, "It's about addiction, and it's about being in Cirque du Soleil," and he actually was in Cirque du Soleil at the time when I met him, and he was what is known as the Crystal Man, and the Crystal Man was sort of the headliner of Cirque du Soleil, and I went to see his show, and I was in tears. It was absolutely beautiful, and the idea that he went from homeless heroin addict to being a star of Cirque du Soleil was just one of those amazing, amazing stories. And we've been friends ever since. So he finally wrote the book Acrobatic. He came to Cambridge 2013 to do a book signing, and I was in his book signing, and we kind of reconnected there. He lives in New York City now, but we've kind of kept in touch on Facebook and email, and he's going to come. He's actually going to do a speaking engagement in Raynham on May 12th. So it's one of those stories that it just, we were doing a cover on talking about heroin addiction and opioid addiction, and I'm like, we have to do a story on Joey, and we did, and it turned out great. The issue's selling very well.
Excellent. While we take a look at some of the other covers, tell
Okay.
us a little bit about the gala that's coming up.
Well, on May 12th, we have Jimmy Tingle, who is one of my favorite local comedians. He is going to be our keynote speaker on May 12th, and it's at the Nerd Center Memorial Drive, which is in Kendall Square. And it's our 23rd anniversary. Spirit Change News has been around for 23 years. We are the oldest street newspaper in the country. So big deal. We're going to have tickets are $60. You can go online, spiritchangenews.net, to purchase tickets. And if you're a student, you have a discount for $35. So it's a great night. We've been working on doing, there's an art exhibit that's going to launch there as well about our vendors. So there's a photo exhibit, and then the photos are fantastic.
So are the photos for sale?
I think they're going to do an auction there. So it's going to be a live auction and a private auction. So I think that they will be for sale.
Excellent.
Yeah.
There was another article in the New York Times. I'm not sure if you saw it,
I don't know.
but it just caught my attention because it was along the lines of what the topic we're discussing, homelessness, and it talked about a football player that I was a star during his time, but because of the concussions issues, you've heard about that in football.
Yeah.
He describes it as his brain no longer works the same, and he became homeless. But talk a little bit about the stereotypes of what people think homeless people say about homeless people, and that they're all drug addicted, they're all there because they want to be. There are some instances where people are working and they're homeless that I discovered. So talk a little bit about the different reasons people are homeless.
Well, there's various reasons, and a lot of it, specifically like with women, a lot of times women are in an abusive situation and are trying to get away from this abusive situation, and they have nowhere to go in a marriage. You see that all the time. The stereotypes in regards to drug addicts and alcoholics are homeless is not true. I've met many, many homeless people, and I would say the percentage is very, very low. I would say maybe like 10%. I don't have the exact stats as to how many people are actually drug addicts. The cause of homelessness is different for every person that I've encountered. A lot of times there's a major life event that occurs, like a concussion or health issues, and they lose their job. And so we're literally one paycheck away from being homeless.
I've heard that. I've heard that.
And I've gone through tough times myself. And my mom was she divorced my father, and we had nowhere to go. So I've been exposed to this situation in my past, and you can be on top of the world. I mean, we've seen celebrities who were making tons of money, and then they lost everything and had nowhere to go. And I've heard of situations where people have ended up in shelters because they had nowhere to crash after, or nowhere to stay after losing their everything.
I believe it. Another reason people that I discovered a lot just by meeting you, healthcare costs.
Absolutely. I'm dealing with that myself. I mean, I'm a freelance writer and I work for Spare Change News, but it's not a high paying job. So I don't have health insurance. And you get penalized in Massachusetts if you don't have insurance. So I'm actually paying more not to have health insurance than to have health insurance. And the people, people that I interact with, our vendors and stuff, same situation. A lot of them aren't covered. However, Obamacare has kind of changed a lot. So a lot of people that didn't have health care before have qualified for health care. But that was a huge issue, like medical bills and just paying for insurance was, people were spending all their money on that and not paying for rent. And it's bad. It's really bad.
It would pay for us to learn more about the subject.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just by me meeting you, but a lot of people are not aware of what the situation is. Also, with the development in the area, with some of the high-tech companies moving to the area and bringing their, highly skilled employees, the housing market is shrinking for people that are already on, say, a fixed income or not necessarily having a high-paying job. So you want to speak to that issue about the housing cost in the Boston area?
Well, we actually, our last segment on Spare Change News TV, we talked about people getting evicted, being priced out of their homes. And these are people that are lifelong residents who are working minimum wage jobs, and they're working and they can't afford their home. So rents are skyrocketing, and people like you and me are getting evicted from our homes because we can't afford it. And we're working. It's not like we're not working. And what's happening, all these developments are really like high-priced developments that are the rents are $3,000, higher than that,
Exactly.
and we can't afford $3,000 a month. That's insane. And these are single mothers with families. These are whole families, entire families that are together who all work, but yet they don't make enough to pay their rent, and they're getting evicted from their homes. So it's a huge issue. I'm all for development and for change, but when you build these developments, build affordable housing and make it accessible for people who really need it.
Exactly. Tell us a little bit about the green badge. I'm to understand that you're to purchase from people with the green badge, and somebody asked me, well, where is it displayed? I saw a green badge on one person on their clothing, but if they don't have the green badge?
Yeah, as the Spare Change News, our vendors, many of them have been vendors for 20 years, and we have a lot of vendors who are veterans and have been doing it for years. They sport a green badge that's with their face on and their name on it, that they are certified Spare Change News vendors. We've had situations in the past where people were not vendors and they were taking the paper and selling it. So when you purchase Spare Change News, they should have their badge on display. Some of our vendors are also documented to be able to go inside the MBTA. So they have an additional badge to be able to be on the platform at the Harvard Square T Station or whatever T Station. So they may have two badges as well.
Oh, okay. Let's see what else we want. Before the show started, we talked a little bit about a homeless Jesus statue. Yeah. And it's a little bit controversial, and it's at St. Paul's Episcopal Cathedral, which is not in the Boston area.
It's in Buffalo, yeah.
So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm all for controversy. I think that this statue, people are leaving things there like gifts, flowers, and it's all about awareness. And I think that something like a statue, it's very subtle that it's there's a crucifixion marks on the statue's feet, and it's a very subtle thing. But people are getting that like Jesus was homeless too, and and it's making a point, and people are responding to it. And I'm all for that. I mean, I think that we have to stop ignoring homeless people, and we have to stand up as people and as citizens, and because it could be us. And I think something like that sort of inspires people to take action.
Yeah, one of my sayings is, but for the grace of God, there go I. Any situation could be me. Talk a little bit about Boston and the Olympics. Some people are saying it's going to adversely affect homeless. Do you have any opinion, yay or nay, as to whether or not the Olympics should come here, and how will that affect homeless people?
Cheryl's getting controversial here. I think it's. I am a journalist, so I love this.
Right.
But I personally, as a journalist perspective, it's my job not to be objective and not to necessarily spew my opinions. But I'm an editor, so I can have an opinion. I love the Olympics. I absolutely love the Olympics. I think that they shine a light on the city. However, I don't think that Boston has the infrastructure to be able to handle the Olympics in 2024. I think that if you look historically at Atlanta, for example, they pushed their homeless out. So we have a history of wanting to get the undesirables out of our city to host the Olympics, because we want to be bright and shiny for the world. And a perfect example, we did a story on Long Island, the shelter we were talking about earlier. Long Island is in Boston Harbor. It's the longest island in Boston Harbor. There's a beautiful lighthouse. There's historic buildings that date back many, many years. And it was home to Boston's largest city-run shelter, but they closed the bridge. Now, the truth is, we wrote a story about this, is they were also considering Long Island as a site for the Olympics in 2024.
Oh.
So the theory is that they wanted the homeless off the island so they can turn it into an Olympics venue.
I think you're being controversial now.
I know, and that is. I mean, the truth is, the bridge was condemned, and
I'm glad I asked you about it.
Yeah, the bridge was condemned, but we have proof that they were considering Long Island for a shooting range. And could you imagine? It's a Long Island. It's a big island, but it's right next to the proposed venue. So the shelter next to a shooting range, I don't think that's a good idea.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
And I noticed that there's a proposal for the bridge to be rebuilt, and there's a budget of $28 million. I don't know the exact number.
Well, the Long Island Bridge.
But when will the bridge be reconstructed?
Well, the bridge was demolished, and so it was condemned on October 8th, and it was completely demolished. And I spent my last summer in the Boston Harbor doing research, and I was on ferries in the harbor, and I would go beneath that bridge, and it was so obvious that it was in disrepair. But people that don't go in the harbor, they don't see how bad it really was. So it should have been condemned. But what I don't understand is why they couldn't ferry over the homeless people to Long Island.
I was thinking about that.
Because I was on a ferry every day. I was on the ferry up until October 30th. I gave ghost boat tours in October, and it doesn't make any sense to me. And they said that because of the choppy waters, and then also for emergency personnel, they had no access to Long Island. But the truth is, there's a emergency ferry out in Boston Harbor. So. And there's also other, medical personnel on the island too, so it didn't make any sense as to why they couldn't ferry people over.
Yeah, I was thinking because once the people were there were no facilities or resources if an emergency should arise. But you're saying there are resources.
I'm saying that there are. I mean, I'm not an expert.
Limited.
There's limited resources, and I mean, if someone overdoses or if there's some bad situation, they have to have medical care pronto, but there's ways to do it. I mean, there is a medical ferry designated to help people in the harbor. They could go there and bring like an ambulance to the mainland.
Well, that may be a future option.
It was just quickly shot down by the mayor of Boston. It really was. I mean, people actually the people were offering to pay for it. And private groups were offered to pay for it, and there's something else going on.
Always a good backstory. It's good to be aware.
And I think it's important not to forget Long Island. I think that it's been 6 months. We just finished our 6-month anniversary of the closing of Long Island, and I'll tell you, it's been a huge ripple effect on our community. And I think that they were expecting for people to just sort of forget about it, and people haven't forgotten. And we have that march coming up on Thursday, and a lot of those people were on Long Island that are protesting on Thursday. So there are lives still affected by October 8th, and it's been a huge ripple effect. We've also seen a shift from going from city-run shelter to private resources, people in the community stepping up to serve the community. And the truth is, the city, during Menino's administration, the city took care of their poor, and it's not happening now. So a lot of the citizens are like the religious leaders of Boston. They opened up a warm shelter. So a lot of people are stepping up, but it's not really the private sector's job to help Boston's homeless.
So was that facility on Long Island specifically run by the state or the?
It was a city-run, yes. It was a city-run shelter. And
So what's comparable now? Where did the people go?
Well, they built Southampton Street Shelter, which I was at the launch of, and there were months and months that they were displaced. They were at various, like the McInnes House, and they were at the in the South End. There was a fitness center that they were all, and they're put on mats and cots, kind of cramped in these horrible conditions. And for 2 days, they were on a barge until they were moved into this situation. And then they opened up the Southampton Street Shelter. It was earlier this year, and it was 100 beds when I was there. And to be honest, it was a rush job. It was put together in 2.5 weeks once they had approvals to open up the shelter. And then they said, hey, we're gonna have more beds coming up in April. And guess what? We're in April, and those beds, there have been hurdles for adding more beds to Southampton Street. So, Mayor, you lied. I mean, like you made a promise, and you didn't come through with a promise. And we only have 100 beds in Southampton Street. And what about the women? It's a men's only facility.
What's the general population of homeless? How many beds do you need to supplement approximately?
Well, if you look at what was on Long Island,
what was on Long?
Well, there was 800, but that included. I mean, there were detox beds too, and we're not even talking about detox beds. Like that's a huge, to me, the biggest loss and the biggest ripple effect in the community. We have the men and we have the women. And we also have detox beds. There was a huge program. Hello House on Long Island that dealt with heroin addiction, and as we see in our current edition, opioid addiction and heroin addiction is huge in Massachusetts, and people are dying.
Right. I believe a few months back, Massachusetts was declared state of emergency because of the heroin addiction problem. So, well, we hope the mayor steps up.
Absolutely.
And finally, what I've just been made aware of, that there are students that are homeless.
Yeah, I was blown away by that because well, for example, I also work at MATV, which is Malden Access TV, and we were talking to the principal at the high school, and he said that there were 100 students at Malden High who were homeless, and I'm like, what? And then so they have the students. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there are a lot of homeless, not only high school students but also college students as well, who. You know, I mean, if I look back at my situation, it was very difficult. Like when we were on break, I had nowhere to go.
Exactly.
And so I had to sleep on a friend's couch, or you know, who knew where you would end up. So there was really nowhere for us to go during, like, we were forced out of our dorm during Thanksgiving and Christmas. So.
Wow, much to learn. But I'm so happy you took the time to talk to us about it. And I want everybody to pick up a copy of Spare Change News, and just be aware as the cover changes, it's time to purchase another copy. And this is the current issue. And also, do you want to mention a little bit about a book?
Well, I mean, I brought my book. I mean,
I'll show it.
In addition to editing Spare Change News, I also write ghost books. So I'm the author of 3 ghost books: Ghost of Boston, Ghost of Cambridge, and Ghost of Salem. And I was working on Haunted Boston Harbor, which is my 4th book, but I put it on hold to focus on Spare Change News. So I'm still on contract to write my 4th ghost book, but I decided that Spare Change News needed me, and I wanted to focus on Spare Change News. I think they really needed me. So the ghosts were calling me. They were like, "Hey, help Boston's homeless population."
So is this helping?
Yeah, I mean, as far as like the Ghosts of Boston, or yeah, I mean, I think that
it's blending. You're blending the two.
Yeah, because I felt like that my job was to, as an author of historical-based ghost books, was to give a voice to those without a voice, and they were, they've gone long ago. I'm giving a voice to those without a voice, but they're homeless, and so I feel it's the same. It's very similar. A lot of similar stories. And if you look historically, Boston Harbor was tragic, a lot of tragedy. There were, if you were different in any way, you were put in the harbor. So if you were Native American, there was a mass genocide on Deer Island. So there's a lot of bad stuff out in Boston Harbor, a lot of bad stuff.
Well, we're looking forward to brighter days, but
Yeah.
it'll be good to hear about some of the ghosts
Yeah, the history.
in order not to repeat some of the
Yeah,
bad.
history repeats itself, and the ghosts. That's what my books are. I mean, my books are looking at history, and the ghosts are speaking. I mean, not literally speaking, but the ghosts. The books are about the historical backstory to a location. And if you look at Long Island, there's a lot of tragedy on Long Island. It was, and in fact, it was inspiration for Dennis Lehane's Shutter Island. So there was a crematorium in the middle of the island. Yeah.
Wow. And you used to give tours of Boston, so you know a lot of history and you know the map, and
I run it.
it'd be very helpful to the mayor in making decisions.
Well, I mean, I run 2 ghost tours, Boston Haunts and Cambridge Haunts. Boston Haunts starts May 1st. Cambridge Haunts is probably going to start in the summer. And I also gave tours with Boston Harbor Cruises in Boston Harbor, which is kind of why I became really passionate about Long Island. So, yeah, I mean, historically, I think that we can learn from our past, and I think that if you look historically at Boston Harbor, we have a history of tragedy. So look at our history.
But if you want to know more about The Ordinary Show, or you have a comment, write to us at theordinaryshow@mail.com, mail.com, theordinaryshow@mail.com. And if you want to know about Spare Change News quickly,
It's sparechangenews.net.
October is Breast